This podcast was produced using artificial intelligence and refined by human editors.
Ladies and gentlemen, pack your bags and charge your cameras. Welcome to Travel with Lara and Luca. I'm Luca, your fellow globetrotter and pathfinder to the world's wonders.
And I'm Lara, your cultural connoisseur and virtual visa to all things travel. Today, we're donning our virtual explorer hats to journey through the sprawling metropolis of Beijing.
Ah, Beijing, a city where whispers of the past meet the roar of the present. It's a place where every cobblestone seems to have a story, doesn't it, Lara?
Indeed, it does, Luca. You can almost hear the echoes of ancient dynasties between the bustling markets and silent temples that stand proudly amidst the city's modern skyline.
You've painted quite the picture already, Lara, and I can't wait to dive into our treasure trove of stories. We'll talk about everything from towering sights to the delectable bites that await hungry travelers.
Oh, the food. I'm already salivating thinking about it, but more on that later. This episode is going to be a scintillating journey full of hidden gems and must-see places worthy of any bucket list.
And let's not forget the bizarre facts and quirky tales that make Beijing the enigmatic city it is. Lara, didn't you have an unusual encounter last time you wandered through an ancient Hutong?
That I did, Luca, that I did. But let's not give it all away just yet. I'm all about that slow burn of a story. But speaking of stories, what amusing anecdote do you have up your sleeve from our dear Beijing?
Well, I do have quite the tale involving a cyclo driver, 3 cups of baijiu, that's a potent Chinese spirit for the uninitiated, and a serendipitous poetry reading under the drum tower. But like you said, let's keep the listeners yearning for more.
That's right. We like to tease you with a little insider knowledge and personal flair before opening the full storybook. So tell me, Luca, do you remember that first moment you set foot in Beijing? The sights, the sounds?
How could I forget? It was this electrifying pulse that courses through you. It's chaotic yet orderly, timeless yet fresh, a whirlwind of contradiction that somehow just fits perfectly.
Beijing does that to you. It's a layer cake of history, progress, and so much charm. You bite into it, and you just keep discovering new flavors. But if we're to peel back these layers, where should we start?
Iconic sights, Lara. There is no better way to kickstart our Beijinger saga than by scaling the architectural marvels of this city. Take, for instance, the Great Wall.
The name Great Wall doesn't do it justice, does it? It's an epic tapestry unwinding through mountains and valleys, telling tales of survival, conquest, and human tenacity.
Stories that often get overlooked when you're standing awestruck by its magnitude. But don't worry, we're here to fill in those colorful details.
And from the imposing heights of the Great Wall, we'll meander into the heart of the city to the formidable Forbidden City, which, spoiler alert, isn't so forbidden anymore, is it, Luca?
Not at all. It's unrolled its once exclusive red carpet to us mere mortals, offering a peek into the lives of emperors and the well-guarded secrets of Chinese governance.
Secrets, insights, and of course, plenty of beauty to explore. That's what awaits you in the next segment. Stick with us, and we'll uncover why this ancient imperial palace is a labyrinth that still fascinates the world over.
And just when you think there can't be more to talk about, we'll switch gears and take you on a culinary circuit you won't forget. Up next, we'll talk about iconic sights of Beijing. But first, a tiny break to catch our breath. Did I hear you sigh, Lara?
Guilty as charged, Luca. I'm just prepping myself for the food segment. I get far too excited catching a whiff of those aromatic Beijing dishes. We'll chop, roast, and simmer our way into the hearts of our food-loving listeners very soon.
Stay tuned, dear adventurers, as we peel back the curtain to reveal the wonders of Beijing's most iconic sights. Beijing, a city where ancient walls whisper stories of empires long gone, a place where history stands tall amid the hum of a metropolis. Welcome, fellow wanderers, to the iconic sights of Beijing.
You had me at whisper, Luca. There's something about those old stones and the secrets they keep. Let's start at the top, shall we? The Great Wall. It's more than just a wall. It's a symbol of endurance that snakes across the landscapes of China.
Endurance, and might I add, a testament to human determination. Imagine, Lara, centuries ago, workers toiling away with rudimentary tools, shaping the destiny of a nation.
Oh, the sun rises there, Luca. climbing up the rugged steps, reaching a watchtower, and then seeing the first light spill over the bricks that have basked in the dawn of countless days.
And each brick could tell 1,000 tales if only we knew how to listen. History comes alive in that early morning light. But then there's the Forbidden City, right in the heart of Beijing, with its own fair share of whispered conversations and royal intrigues.
The Forbidden City. Oh, what I'd give to have seen the imperial court in its glory days. Did you know, Luca, they say the last emperor believed the palace was haunted? Spirits of the past threading through the hall of supreme harmony.
Haunted? Well, wandering through those halls, I certainly did feel the weight of unseen eyes. There's solemnity, isn't there, in those perfectly aligned courtyards, each one a step closer to the center of Chinese power.
Perfectly aligned, and yet so easy to get lost. Remember when we turned a corner and found ourselves in that quiet spot with the ancient pines?
Indeed, I do. A sacred silence amidst a palace that has seen so much of China's tumultuous history. But as we move on from the center of imperial power, let's meander over to the Summer Palace. Lara, do you recall the tale of the marble boat?
How could I forget? An emperor's folly, a stone boat that will never sail. It's poetic, really. Something so strong, unable to fulfill the purpose most boats are made for. And the views from there, across Kunming Lake, sheer serenity.
Sheer serenity, Lara, with a hint of irony. Imagine commissioning a boat that will forever wait for a tide that never comes, only in Beijing. Yet speaking of serene, let's not forget about the imperial gardens. They say the Empress Dowager Cixi would spend hours enjoying her lotus flowers.
Those gardens are like strolling through a living scroll painting, honestly. And speaking of living art, Beijing's modern vibe shines through in the art district. But we'll save that for our hidden gems.
Ah, the magic of anticipation. But back to the now. Did I ever tell you about my favorite photo spot, Lara?
The one by the Tower of Buddhist Incense? Oh, Luca, that's everyone's favorite spot. But your photo with the mischievous squirrel, now that's a unique take.
That little critter knew exactly when to leap into frame. It was as though even the wildlife in Beijing knows how to strike a pose.
And strike a pose we must when we talk about the sheer spectacle of Tiananmen Square. Luca, do you remember standing there, facing south, with the whole expanse opening up before us?
That vastness, it humbles you. Right there at the heart of Beijing, with Chairman Mao's portrait looking down, it's a real fusion of the old and new. Skyscrapers on one horizon and gates from dynasties past on the other.
And if we stroll through those gates, there's the National Museum, our very treasure trove of Chinese civilization.
Oh, the exhibits. From jade burial suits to dynastic portraits, each artifact is a journey through time.
Just like Beijing itself, every corner turned is another chapter in the chronicles of a city reborn time and time again.
Speaking of being reborn, nothing embodies this spirit quite like the bird's nest. The 2008 Olympics, what an event that was. And the stadium, Lara, it's as if a giant metal bird left its nest right in the middle of Beijing for us to marvel at.
Oh, it's marveled all right, especially at night when it lights up. The entire area becomes an urban carnival of sorts. But let's not forget about another star of the show, the water cube. Lit up, it's a beacon of blue in the Beijing night.
It's pretty hard to forget, with its bubble-like exterior. Kids pressing their faces against it, watching swimmers glide and turning with dreams of aquatic prowess.
Well, talking about bubbles and dreams has certainly set the stage for our dive into Beijing's cuisine. In our next segment, my friend, prepare your palate for a feast.
A feast indeed, from delectable Peking duck to the humble yet sublime jinbing. Ready your taste buds, listeners, but for now, this has been Iconic Sights. All right, let's talk about something that's close to my heart and stomach, Beijing's delicious cuisine.
Absolutely, Luca. One cannot simply visit Beijing without discussing the culinary delights. And when we say cuisine, the first dish that pops into everyone's mouth. Mine is Peking duck.
Oh, the Peking duck. Can we just take a moment to appreciate the artistry that goes into preparing it? That crispy skin, the juicy meat, and that smoky flavor as it's roasted in an open or a hung oven.
And the history, Luca, it dates back to the imperial era, where it was served in the royal palace. It's not just a meal, it's an experience, a delicacy that's been perfected over centuries.
The ceremony of carving the duck tableside, that's theatrical. Every slice is a testament to the chef's skill. It's like watching a live performance, and when they deliver those perfect slices right onto your plate,
You create this perfect package with a thin pancake, slather on some sweet bean sauce, add a few sticks of cucumber and scallion, then the star of the show, the duck. It's the stuff of dreams.
True, Lara. Now, do you remember the time we tried to master Jianbing on the streets of Beijing?
Master is a bit generous, Luca. More like bumbling foreigners attempting street food. Jianbing has got to be the ultimate street breakfast. A savory crepe that's a symphony of flavors and textures.
You start with this thin layer of batter, then the egg cracked on top, followed by the scattering of scallions, cilantro, maybe some jiachai, and let's not forget the crispy wonton or dabing for that crunch. All these are wrapped up in an artful roll.
And the first bite, it's a hot, flavorful, fresh, and satisfying mess in your hands. Crunchy, yet soft, spicy, but also tangy with that rich black bean sauce. It's no wonder it's a hit with the morning crowds.
You just can't get it right the first few tries. Remember how ours looked like an abstract painting? It tasted amazing, though.
A delicious disaster. But oh, speaking of tasteful artistry, the tea ceremony in Beijing is another must-do. There's this quiet elegance to it, a ritual that kind of forces you to slow down and appreciate the moment.
It's poetic, isn't it? The sound of water boiling, the fragrance of the tea leaves as they unfurl in hot water. It's like being part of an ancient tradition.
Right, and the thing about Beijing is, it takes something as simple as tea and turns it into a reminder of the finer things in life. Patience, beauty, and craftsmanship in a cup.
We can't forget about the local dishes that fly under the radar for many travelers, like the home-style cooking of, say, Hong Shao Ru, braised pork belly. It's aromatically rich. The meat is so tender, it melts in your mouth.
Yes, or jjajangmyeon, Beijing's answer to spaghetti, but with this thick, savory yellow soybean paste over hand-pulled wheat noodles, often mixed with diced cucumbers or radishes for that fresh crunch.
I've always admired the juxtaposition of simple yet robust flavors in dishes like those. It's such a great example of how Beijing cuisine respects the integrity of ingredients, letting their natural flavors do the heavy lifting.
And somehow, in Beijing, no matter where you dine, whether it's a high-end place or a hole-in-the-wall eatery, there's this feeling that food is not just sustenance. It's a story about culture, people, and history being told through recipes passed down through generations.
True that, Lara. Speaking of surprisingly good finds, do you remember that night we stumbled upon that courtyard restaurant hidden in a narrow Hutong alley?
Oh, I do. It felt like we'd been let in on a secret, like we'd traveled back in time. They served specialties you'd seldom find elsewhere, a menu that was more of a culinary treasure map.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of Beijing's cuisine. It invites you to indulge in the familiar, but will always surprise you with the unfamiliar. Your taste buds go on their own kind of adventure.
Indeed. All right, folks, while we let our imaginary taste buds cool down a bit after that spicy virtual feast, we're whipping up the next segment that promises to be as engaging as the last.
That's right. We're about to unearth some of Beijing's hidden gems. These are the spots that don't always make it to the guidebooks, but are absolutely worth your while.
Stay tuned to uncover those off-the-beaten-path treasures that could become the highlight of your Beijing adventures.
All right, listeners, we're delving deep into the heart of Beijing to uncover some of the city's best-kept secrets, its hidden gems. Lara, ready to explore the less trodden paths of this ancient city?
You know it, Luca. There's nothing I love more than finding those spots that feel like they're just waiting for you to discover them. Let's kick things off with the 798 Art Zone. It's like a playground for the modern soul nestled in the shell of an old military factory.
Oh, I adore that place. Walking through those decommissioned factory buildings, you can almost hear the clanging of the past as you gaze at the bright, bold future captured in contemporary art pieces.
Absolutely. And there's always that one sculpture that catches the sunlight just right, creating this dance of shadows that feels like a secret message just for you.
I know the one. And nearby, there's that tiny cafe, remember? the one that had the most interesting twist on a classic jasmine tea, served with a side of avant-garde performance art.
That was one unexpected tea ceremony. Speaking of unexpected, there's something so serene about stumbling upon the ancient temples that aren't listed in every guidebook.
Oh, for sure. My favorite morning in Beijing was watching the sunrise as it bathed the tiles of this little-known temple's roof in gold. It was just me and the birds for at least an hour before anyone else appeared.
Pure magic. And what about those cultural experiences that tourists rarely find? Like the local baozi shop, where the owner teaches you to pinch the perfect pleat if you show just a hint of interest.
Or like when you discover that market full of handcrafted trinkets. Each one tells a story, and you end up with unique souvenirs, each with a personal connection to the maker.
You've stumbled onto some real treasures. Remember walking through the Hutongs near Huhai Lake? The way the locals sit outside playing chess, willing to challenge any brave passerby to a game?
Oh, I was no match for those masters. But the Hutong that really sticks with me is the one where we heard traditional pipa music drifting through the air. We followed the sound and found a musician practicing for a performance that night.
It was like his music pulled us through time. I feel I left a part of my spirit there, floating in the crisp Beijing air. And speaking of spirit, do you recall that tiny bookshop crammed with volumes on everything from local legends to contemporary poetry?
How could I forget? The smell of the paper was as intoxicating as the stories held within. The shopkeeper told us about a club for local writers and poets that met in the back room on Fridays. It was such a vibrant part of the community's fabric.
Beijing is full of stories just yearning to be heard. Will your next mysterious locale be just as poetic, Luca?
Couldn't be truer, Lara. And yes, I've got the perfect segue. Imagine taking a stroll under a night sky pierced by a spire that local lore says holds the key to the gates of heaven.
You're not talking about the Silver Fox's tower, are you? That ancient pagoda rumored to be the haunt of a celestial fox who guards celestial secrets?
The very one. The best part is, it's not on the usual tourist track, but it's steeped in myths and surrounded by a grove that whispers with centuries of untold stories.
I remember when we nearly missed it. Who would have thought a simple left turn could lead us to such a mystical spot, a hidden gem indeed. And while we count the pagoda's tales, let's not forget the food gems hidden in the winding alleys.
Absolutely. Those tiny dim sum spots where each bite is a revelation. Or that courtyard tucked away where a family serves up the most exquisite, fragrant noodle dishes you've ever tasted.
Speaking of taste, that brings us to our next tantalizing topic, weird facts. Beijing's got some bizarre stories and facts that will make your head spin, right, Luca?
Couldn't agree more, Lara. And I guarantee there will be some delicious factoids that are just as surprising as Beijing's best dumplings. Stay tuned, listeners. And after that delightful culinary tour, welcome back, dear travelers. We're diving into the must-see places of Beijing in this segment of Travel with Lara and Luca.
When we talk about must-see places, you really can't sidestep the symbolic heart of Beijing, and indeed all of China, Tiananmen Square.
Oh, absolutely. Did you know it's one of the largest city squares in the world? The vast expanse is awe-inspiring in itself.
It's where history has played out in monumental events, not all easy to talk about. But standing there, you feel the weight of history, the echoes of footsteps past.
True that. And when you turn around, there's the Forbidden City, reminding you of the age of emperors and grand processions.
But let's not forget something more contemporary, the National Stadium, or as most people know it, the Bird's Nest.
You took the words right out of my mouth. The Bird's Nest, especially at night under the Beijing sky, it's like an illuminated cradle of modernity.
Its design is so unique, and seeing it sparkle against the night sky really makes you appreciate architecture as an art form.
And if you time it right, when the crowds have thinned out a bit, it's just serene.
Speaking of serene, I've got to mention the Temple of Heaven. It's not just a temple, Luca. It's a symphony of structures dedicated to annual ceremonies performed by the emperors for bountiful harvests.
Ah, the Temple of Heaven. There's this unspoken whisper between those blue-tiled roofs and the sky, something eternal.
You're getting poetic on me again, Luca.
Guilty as charged, but we can't overlook the park surrounding it, Locals dancing, practicing Tai Chi. It's like they're part of the larger harmony.
Adding to that harmony, take a trek up to Jingshan Park. That's where you get to see the full grandeur of the Forbidden City spread beneath you.
Oh, Lara, the view from the pavilion atop the hill is astounding. Watching the sunset there transformed the way I saw time. All of Beijing seems to stand still for a moment.
Yeah, from the Ming Dynasties to the 21st century, Beijing's soul is laid bare right before you in one sweeping panorama.
Hey, speaking of views, do you remember playing hide and seek in Beihai Park, trying to find the white dagoba?
How could I forget? Surrounded by the lake, it's like an emblem of peace and tranquility amidst the bustling city. Every corner of Beihai Park is a snapshot waiting to happen.
And snapshots, of course, bring us back to the art of the visual, and nothing's more visually striking than the CCTV headquarters.
Oh, the giant pants! It's incredible how a building can become an affectionate nickname among locals.
I love how Beijing embraces the modern without losing its ancient grip. Speaking of modern, have you been to the up-and-coming Chaoyang district?
Absolute must-see for the futuristic side of Beijing. It's like walking centuries into the future with each block.
From hutongs to high-rises, from temple bells to electronic beats, this city doesn't just embrace duality, it revels in it.
Well said, Luca. And if I may tug at the heartstrings of our bibliophiles, a visit to the National Library.
Go on.
Imagine this. You're surrounded by the collective wisdom of centuries. Books, manuscripts, knowledge so vast, you can almost hear it whispering from the shelves.
Whispers again, Lara? But I'm with you. An atmosphere steeped in thought and reflection.
And as we reflect on these must-see places of Beijing, remember, travelers, the city isn't just about places. It's the stories, the people.
And speaking of stories, stick around, because up next we'll share some of the quirkiest, most mind-boggling facts about Beijing that you probably never knew existed.
Get ready for myths, mysteries, and maybe a chuckle or two as we dive into the weird and wonderful.
So don't go anywhere. Travel with Lara and Luca is about to take an eccentric turn. So, welcome back to the weird and wonderful Beijing with your hosts Luca and
Lara, weaving tales of the peculiar, the bizarre, and the truly unexpected.
Let's start with one of my favorite quirks of the city, the echo wall at the Temple of Heaven. Did you know if you whisper a secret at one end, it travels all the way around to the other side?
Absolutely, it's acoustical magic. But imagine if those walls could talk, Luca, the secrets they must hold from centuries of whispers.
And not just any secrets, Lara. Secrets of emperors and commoners alike. A testament to Chinese ingenuity. Speaking of ingenuity, the water cube. Hey?
Oh, the National Aquatic Center. Sure, it hosted the 2008 Olympics, but here's something else. Its bubble wrap-like exterior is based on the natural pattern of cells and soap bubbles for optimum strength and efficiency.
Efficiency wrapped in a bubble. Now that's something you don't hear every day. I'm pretty sure they didn't expect it to become a giant meme, though.
And speaking of unexpected, Beijing has its own leaning tower, the Huabiao at Tiananmen. It leans just enough to make you question if that extra Peking duck has thrown off your balance.
That tilted pole is actually an intentional architectural feature. It's almost philosophical, don't you think? A metaphor for life, tilting but not falling over.
Ah, the poetry of Beijing showing up in the way they build things. Now here's one for you. Did you know that Chinese white dolphins are sometimes seen off the coast?
Dolphins? In Beijing? Now that is the definition of weird fact, considering Beijing isn't exactly on the coast.
No, not in Beijing itself, but if you venture to the Bohai Sea not too far away, you might just spot them. But their rarity makes it more of a legend than a sighting these days.
Beijing's real-life mythical creatures. Now let's not forget the cricket fighting. Yes, folks, cricket fighting has been a thing here.
I'm chuckling, but it's a serious sport with a fan following. Just imagine being a cricket trainer, Luca. How does one pump up a cricket before the big fight?
Feed it the finest blades of grass and play it motivational chirping music, perhaps?
A Rocky Balboa moment, but for crickets. I'll tell you another fact. There's a replica of the White House in Beijing.
Well, when you can't go to DC, Beijing brings DC to you, I guess.
Everything from luxury mansions to entire replicas of European towns. Beijing might as well be nicknamed the city of doppelgangers.
Now, to tickle the funny bone further, how about the fact that there was an emperor who believed he could live forever by taking special pills, which ironically contained mercury, and well, did quite the opposite.
That's Emperor Qin Shi Huang for you, famous for his terracotta army and not so much for his knowledge of medicine.
Guess eternal life was lost in translation there. But Beijing is immortal in many ways through its living history.
Especially with the myth of dragons lurking beneath the city. Dragon veins, they call them, channels of cosmic energy that flow beneath the streets.
And from cosmic dragons to mooncakes, Beijing practices moon worship during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Not weird, but incredibly charming when you see city lights replaced by brightness of moonlit festivities.
Now let's bring back to why no high-rises are built in the heart of the city. Can't be blocking the dragon's path or upsetting the feng shui.
Nothing gets in the way of a dragon's leisurely stroll, not if you want your city to prosper.
Have I ever told you about the time I tried to find all the statues of the zodiac across the city? It's an urban scavenger hunt for history buffs.
That's one to put on the to-do list. Before we set off on another Beijing mystery, let's wrap up this segment with one last bizarre fact. Do you know the largest collection of menus is in Beijing?
And it's not even in a restaurant, Luca, but rather in a library. A testament to the array of culinary experiences this city has to offer.
Speaking of experiences, keep your ears ready for our next segment where we unravel the rich tapestry of Beijing's
history, because no city's quirkiness is complete without tales of its past. Stay with us for a deep dive into the dynasties and decisions that shaped Beijing into the wonder it is today.
The intricate tapestry of history that graces every corner of Beijing. Isn't it fascinating, Lara?
Truly so, Luca. This city is like an open-air museum with stories etched into its walls, streets, and palaces. And speaking of palaces, the Forbidden City alone has enough history to fill books.
Right you are. Did you know that the Ming Dynasty, which gave us this iconic palace, shifted their capital to Beijing in 1421? It's hard to believe that the city's historical influence stretches back nearly 6 centuries.
It's amazing. The Ming emperors designed the city to be the center of the universe, aligning it to cardinal points. Still, Beijing's history goes back even earlier, to the Yuan dynasty and beyond, to the time when it was known as Dadu.
Oh yes, the grand capital of Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan. It must have been quite the sight back then, and the marks they left on the city still resonate through Beijing's modern sprawl.
And then there's the Temple of Heaven, where emperors would perform solemn rites to guarantee the prosperity of their empire. Imagine the secrets those altars hold.
I often wonder what the ancients would think if they saw their city now, buzzing with technology, yet still loyal to the traditional customs they established.
Speaking of traditions, did you ever dive into how the Beijing opera came to be? It's a fascinating fusion of music, vocal performance, mime, dance, and acrobatics.
That's quite the melange. It's all thanks to the Qing Dynasty, which followed the Ming. They really supported the performing arts. Some say that if you want to understand traditional Chinese culture, start with the Beijing opera.
Absolutely. Each performance is a peek into the past, whether it be a historical tale or a folk story. You know, some of those elaborate costumes weigh up to 40 pounds.
Imagine doing acrobatics in that getup. Stability aside, let's not forget the Silk Road's influence on Beijing's history. The city has always been a hub for multicultural exchange.
In every silk thread and spice scent lingering in the air, you sense centuries of travelers and traders making their mark here in Beijing.
It's like every street in Beijing is a crossroads of the past and the present, doesn't it? Take the Yuanming Yuan, the old summer palace. Once a garden of gardens, ravaged during the Second Opium War.
Those ruins, hauntingly beautiful, aren't they? They are a poignant reminder of the ebb and flow of cultural and political tides that have shaped Beijing.
Now, there's an ancient figure I'm always intrigued by, Yongle Emperor. The same guy who commissioned the construction of the Forbidden City and who also moved the capital from Nanjing to Beijing.
And he was a fan of big projects. Did you know he also commanded the voyages of Zheng He, the great explorer who sailed as far as Africa, long before Columbus even set off?
Beijing's history really isn't just about emperors and war. It's about visionaries, adventurers, and let's not forget the scholars. The city's been a center for education and culture through the centuries.
From the philosophers in the ancient academies to the student-led May 4th movement in 1919, which was pivotal in Chinese history, sparking intellectual and political changes.
The city is steeped in pivotal moments like these, and yet it's constantly looking forward, evolving. Just walking through the Hutongs, you get to witness the living history, centuries-old houses next to trendy cafes.
It's almost like time travel, isn't it? And let's not overlook the incredible Temple of Confucius in Beijing, second only to the one in Khufu. Confucianism has shaped much of China's educational system and cultural values.
That's a testament to Beijing's resilience, isn't it? No matter how much it changes and modernizes, it always retains its soul, like an evergreen tree growing new branches, but firmly rooted.
And here we are, caught up in the branches of this magnificent, ancient tree called Beijing. So what do you say, Luca? Ready to give our listeners some tips that even Confucius would approve of?
Absolutely. I believe it's time we tackle the now and how, transitioning from the scrolls of history to the maps of modern-day travels. Next up, lessons we've learned from our explorations, expert travel tips, coming your way. Welcome back, fellow travelers. In this segment of Travel with Lara and Luca, we're dishing out our expert travel tips for navigating Beijing like a seasoned wayfarer.
Oh, Beijing can be a labyrinth of history and culture, so knowing a few tricks can make all the difference. Luca, let's start with your top tip for getting around this grand city.
Absolutely, Lara. Tip number 1, mastering the subway. Beijing's metro system is extensive and efficient. Grab a reloadable Hutong card to avoid fumbling with tickets for every ride.
I love the subway. And hey, if you're ever lost or need assistance, don't be shy. Locals are generally helpful, even if there's a language barrier.
Very true. Now, Lara, tell us about those infamous Beijing traffic jams and how to dodge them.
If there's one thing you want to avoid, it's getting stuck in traffic. I recommend planning your travels outside of rush hour. Keep in mind that means avoiding the roads from 7 to 9 in the morning and 5 to 7 in the evening.
A ready excuse to sleep in or enjoy a longer dinner, right?
Exactly. Now, how about visiting those popular spots like the Forbidden City or the Temple of Heaven? My tip, go early or late. You'll get a more tranquil experience, and the light is just magical for photos.
Spot on, Lara. The early bird catches the worm, or in this case, the perfect shot without a sea of selfie sticks.
Talking about photos, always ask before you snap a picture of someone. It's just respectful, and who knows, you might make a new friend.
That's true. Lara, have you got any advice on bargaining at markets?
Oh yes, the delicate art of haggling. Always start your offer low, engage with a smile, and don't be afraid to walk away. Sometimes that's when the best price magically appears.
It's a dance, isn't it? But let's pivot a bit. How should our listeners pack for Beijing's climate?
Beijing has 4 distinct seasons. Pack layers and be prepared for anything. Your best bet is versatile clothing that you can easily add or remove as the day progresses.
Great tip. And if you're visiting in the winter, don't forget a quality air mask. Pollution can be a real challenge.
Speaking of challenges, navigating the language barrier can be tough. Luca, what's your go-to strategy?
Learn a few basic Mandarin phrases. Hello, thank you, and how much go a long way. But also keep a translation app on your phone for the more complex conversations.
And speaking of phones, always carry a portable battery pack with you. There's nothing worse than your phone dying when you need directions back to your hotel.
Exactly, Lara. Now on to meals. Any tips on dining out in Beijing?
Street food is a must-try, but always look for the stands with a queue. Local approval is your best quality indicator. And don't drink tap water. Stick to bottled or boiled water.
Another gem, Lara. Let's talk cash. Credit cards are gaining acceptance, but cash is still king in many places, especially local markets.
Yes, and always carry some small change. Public restrooms often charge a fee, and trust me, when you gotta go, you gotta go.
Right you are. Lara, you've spent a good deal of time in local boutiques. Any shopping tips?
My favorite, quality over quantity, always. And if you're purchasing antiques, ensure they have a red seal. It's a certification allowing them to be legally exported.
Wonderful advice. Let me add, when it comes to accommodation, consider staying in a boutique hotel or a traditional courtyard house to really immerse in the culture.
And always keep a hotel business card on you when you go out. If you hop in a cab and can't communicate the address, the card is your ticket home.
Last but not least, staying connected is crucial. Invest in a local SIM card or portable Wi-Fi device for easy internet access.
It makes life so much easier. All right, Luca, before we wrap up, any parting travel wisdom for our listeners?
Just this, travel with an open heart and mind. Embrace the unexpected, and don't just see the sights, experience them.
Beautifully said, Luca. Beijing is waiting for you to make your own stories. Just imagine what adventures lie ahead.
And speaking of adventures, stay tuned for our next segment where we explore the joy of side excursions, revealing the hidden treasures just outside Beijing.
That's right, like the majesty of the Great Wall snaking into the countryside. So stay with us. Nestled just outside the bustling city life of Beijing, there's a treasure trove of serene escapes and cultural wonderlands waiting to be explored.
Absolutely, and that's what we're going to dive into today. From ancient tombs to villages frozen in time, the side excursions around Beijing are adventure gems. Side excursions offer that breath of fresh air and a dip into history outside the city buzz.
Let's start with the Ming tombs, or as they're locally known, the 13 tombs of the Ming Dynasty. These are sacred sites, and the stillness there, it's almost tangible.
Oh, I know. Walking through the Spirit Way, with those giant stone statues guarding the tombs, you can almost sense the spirits of the past emperors keeping you company.
And then there's Changling, the biggest of the tombs. It's elegant, and it's the final resting place of Emperor Yongle. He's the guy who moved the capital from Nanjing to Beijing.
You know, I remember sitting there on the steps, gazing out over the lushness of the area, and you can't help but get lost in time. And did you ever notice the echo? If you stand in front of the main gate and clap, the sound reverberates.
Every time it makes me think of all the whispered orders and secrets those walls have absorbed over the centuries.
From the sacred to the serene, how about we cycle out to the countryside next? There's nothing like feeling the breeze in your hair as you pedal through trails that offer a completely different view of Beijing's outskirts.
Ah, cycling. Yes, it's so invigorating. And the landscapes, they alternate between small farms, flowering orchards, and quiet temple grounds.
One moment, you're in the middle of nature, and the next, you're welcomed by a quaint village. The contrast from the city is stunning. You're suddenly part of a slower, more measured rhythm of life.
And speaking of villages, have you been to Quandixia village?
Yes, it's like traveling back to the Ming Dynasty. The preserved courtyard homes stretch up the hillside and offer this authentic snapshot of historical rural China.
I just adore walking through the narrow lanes between those Siheyuan-style homes. And you know, those walls hold stories of traders who passed down that famous Silk Road.
Plus the villagers. Everyone's so hospitable, sharing stories, inviting you to taste their home-cooked meals. It's culinary and cultural exploration hand in hand.
Quandixia is a living museum, isn't it? Amongst those hills are centuries of lifestyles unchanged by modernity.
For our listeners who are history buffs, want to tell them about the Imperial Gardens at Chengde next?
Oh, the mountain resort and its outlying temples. It was the summer home for Qing Dynasty emperors, and it's so expansive. Think vast gardens, intricate buildings, and a massive lake that's so serene when the summer fog hovers over it in the morning.
Exactly. Remember taking a boat out on the lake and seeing the mist curl around the pagoda of mist and rain?
How could I forget? One of those perfectly tranquil moments. Also, the temples. They're this awesome mix of Tibetan, Han, and Mongolian architectural styles. It's culture upon culture, a harmonious blend, a real must-see.
And just a short trip away, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site for a reason. The history, the harmony of the landscape, it's just awe-inspiring.
Exactly. These side excursions are where you really connect with the earthy roots of China, away from the soaring skyscrapers and bustling streets. They offer such a rich, grounding contrast.
Grounding. That's the perfect word for it. And for our listeners planning their next trip, this is the part of your journey where you recharge, reflect, maybe even find a piece of yourself you didn't know was missing.
Whether it's amid the echoing chambers of the Ming tombs, the cultural tapestry of Quandixia, or the refreshing vistas of Chengde, these excursions enrich your experience of Beijing in ways you can't imagine.
They're the chapters of your travel story you'll find yourself recounting time and time again.
It's almost a meditative experience, right? To step out of the city and let these sights move and transform you.
Absolutely. A meditative journey through time, space, and self. Now, I guess it's about time we wrap up this segment.
Yes, it's been quite the sojourn through Beijing's side excursions today. So, dear travelers, make sure your Beijing adventure includes these essential getaways.
For our next segment, we're going to close this episode by reflecting on all the wonderful pieces of Beijing we've shared today. And we've just about reached the end of our journey together.
So stay tuned as we conclude with our final thoughts, some personal takeaways, and of course, that special Lara and Luca spin on things.
Well, Lara, it feels like moments ago we embarked on this virtual journey through the enchanting streets and history-laden avenues of Beijing.
Absolutely, Luca. Our chat today has certainly taken me back to the sights, the sounds, and the sense of this city that feels as ancient as time itself and yet pulses with modern life.
It's that unique beat of Beijing, ancient drums echoing in sync with electronic buzzes, that binds you to the city, doesn't it?
It does. We've wandered through the iconic Tiananmen Square in our minds, marveled at the vista from atop the Great Wall,
and immersed ourselves in the tastes of Beijing, from succulent Peking duck to the humble yet ever-delicious Jianbing. Food is indeed a journey in itself there.
Beijing certainly teaches you to expect the unexpected. Would you ever forget about that echo wall, Luca?
How could I? Secrets whispered at one end can travel in surprising clarity to the other. Seems like Beijing is built on the sublime and the surreal.
Our detour through the Dynasties and Beijing's pivotal role in the Silk Road reminds us of how deeply rooted this city is in the past.
Yet, it's also embracing the future, right, Lara? From our expert tips for navigating the city like a pro, to remembering to keep paper money on you since some places don't take plastic.
And let's not forget the side excursions, Luca. The serenity of the countryside and the rustic charm of Quandixia village. It's like stepping back in time.
Our final thoughts, Lara. Beijing is inexhaustible, a universe in a city constantly unfolding and forever enchanting.
It's this beautiful paradox, isn't it? Beijing invites you to lose yourself in its vastness, yet offers you intimate moments that speak to your soul. Every alley, every temple has a whisper of the past that somehow resonates with the present.
So true. My final thought would be to remain open to the stories, the history, the cultural layers, and to the idea that the more you explore, the more you realize there's still left to discover.
With an open heart in Beijing, you'll find poetry in motion, a flurry of kites against a clear sky, a peaceful smile from an elder in the park, the harmonious blend of chaos and tranquility.
And speaking of discoveries, Lara, I can't help but think about the stories our listeners will share. If you visited Beijing, your experiences are as much a part of this city's narrative as its walls and palaces.
Do share them with us. Your moments of surprise, your culinary adventures, your brushes with history, they add even more color to the vibrant tapestry that is Beijing.
As we wrap up today's episode of Travel with Lara and Luca, we leave you with the words of the traveler and writer Pico Iyer. We travel, initially, to lose ourselves, and we travel next to find ourselves.
May you lose yourself in the beauty of Beijing and find joy in the journey. Until our next episode, keep wandering.
And keep wondering. Next time, we'll take you on an adventure through the mystic lanes and spellbinding shores of fall, but that's a story for another day.
So stay tuned for yet another thrilling episode of Travel with Lara and Luca, where we ensure the journey is as remarkable as the destination.
Here's to you, to Beijing, and to another chapter in the traveler's diary just waiting to be written. Take care and see you next time.